A quick check of the calendar indicates the New York primary is but 6 days away. And that means that on the Democrat side, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are sharpening attacks on each other. With the battle for the Big Apple on the Democrat side, will it get uglier? And what will happen if both campaigns go negative? Might it hurt both candidates? To talk about it, let's welcome in our next political panel. From Newsmax, New York, noted radio and TV commentator Ellis Henican. And joining us via Skype from Indianapolis, former White House spokesman for President George W. Bush, Pete Seat. Pete is currently the senior project manager for Hathaway Strategies. And as I mentioned, he's in Indianapolis, where he Skypes in tonight. So there you are, Ellis, in the epicenter in New York City. Bernie picks up a couple of key union endorsements today, and it appears that both Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton are starting to sling a little mud at each other.
Welcome to politics.
That's right.
Right? I mean, that's why we like it, right? I mean, if all they did was compliment each other, it would be kind of boring. The weird thing, JD, is that New York actually matters this time, right? It's been so rare that New York has played any significant role in a presidential campaign, whether it be the primary or the general. And you know what? This thing is a real race. I mean, Hillary has a lot of advantages, but, Bernie has surprised everybody. So, yeah, it's fun to be the center of the universe for a change.
Pete Seat, not often do we see Republicans get union endorsements. That certainly didn't happen today in Brooklyn. The transit union coming out for Senator Sanders. But, it was interesting. Earlier this week, Pete, we saw Hillary actually put out ads attacking Donald Trump. Now, is that just inviting problems, given the fact that Sanders can appeal to the hardcore leftists, and New York has got some hardcore leftists?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, JD. I'll start by saying New York is always the center of the universe when it comes to media. Maybe just now on the campaign it is. But yeah, Bernie Sanders got that transit union endorsement, I think about 40,000 members. Likely they made that decision because Hillary Clinton didn't know how to use a Metro card to get on the subway a couple of days ago. So they're going to go with Bernie Sanders instead. And, those are the types of people. I don't know the particular demographics of the group, but, he's been going after blue collar workers, predominantly white males around the country. That's his really good base support. And so getting that endorsement is key. But Hillary Clinton also got an endorsement from a union as well, about half the size, the local chapter of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So you've got a little bit of a battle of the union endorsements going on here, too.
Well, but it's interesting, Ellis, because Bernie Sanders went the extra mile with the Verizon walkout. He shows up on that picket line, casting all sorts of aspersions about the evil of corporations, so forth and so on. I don't know if a strong letter was to follow. Is Bernie just a better retail politician than Hillary Clinton?
Well, I don't know that you would know that from New York. I mean, she's a good 10 points ahead in most of the polls that I've seen over the past few days. They're both, I think, decent retail politicians. And you're right to focus on unions. This is one city in America, one state in America, where unions still carry a lot of heft. And you know what? You got to go to the voters where they are. And in New York, a whole bunch of them are still in unions.
So, Pete, I'm going to give you a very different assignment. If you had to advise the self-described democratic socialist, we'll just take ideology away and just in terms of basic politics, to cut into that lead that Ellis mentioned, and it is true that Hillary in most surveys is about 10 points ahead. Can Sanders cut that thing down in the next 6 days, and how would he do it?
Well, I don't think he's going to. For him, for Hillary right now, it's a delegate lead. For Bernie, it's a message lead. And Bernie Sanders knows that he needs to fight with her to stay in the news. Most of the coverage is on the Republican side of the aisle, and the skirmishes going on there between Trump and the RNC and all the delegate rules. And Bernie needs conflict. He needs the two of them to trade insults and throw jabs at each other to try and break through, to try and keep his people excited. And the crowds keep coming out. I mean, I watched live that Verizon rally, and they ate up the fact that Bernie Sanders was there. That was a huge moment for him to be able to pull that off on very short notice.
And we're seeing scenes from this morning as he went out to the picket lines there at Verizon right now. So, Ellis Henican, you've been in New York a long time, seen a lot of things. You mentioned Hillary's lead, but is Bernie going to ratchet up the rhetoric, the anti-corporate rhetoric, the hundreds of $1,000s per speech for Hillary rhetoric? And will he be able to cut Mrs. Clinton's lead come next Tuesday?
Oh, well, he may tighten it up a little bit, and yeah, that's Bernie's message. Here's a prediction I would make along those lines, though, JD. Hillary Clinton, who is likely to get the nomination, I think we all agree on that, will be the most moderate candidate that the Democratic Party nominates for president in our lifetime. The passion in that party is on the left these days. Bernie's not going to get the nomination, but he is indeed philosophically the future of the Dems. In the same way that the Republicans spent the last 40 years going to the right, the Dems will probably spend the next 40 going to the left.
Well, it's worth noting that as they continue to move that way, I don't know if I would say that Hillary is going to be the most moderate, maybe in this century, but
most
the guy
moderate in our lifetime.
I don't know, not in our lifetime. I think Bill Clinton moved out with that new third way of doing things, but we'll quibble. I'll bow to your authority as a liberal on this. Tell you what, guys, hang in there. We've got some Republican topics to talk about, trying to give equal time. Well, no matter my perspective or that of Ellis or Pete, I'm interested in your perspective, your take on what's going on in New York in both parties, and is Sanders and his leftist tendency really the wave of the future? Send your comments to me, newsmaxtv.com/comments, or via Twitter at NewsmaxPrime. We're coming right back.
I will not be the nominee for our party. We should select among the people who actually ran for the job.
Does that mean we could see someone like Scott Walker, Marco Rubio, or Jeb Bush back
I'm not
again?
going to foreclose anybody's option. You have to be one of the candidates running for president who ran for president.
The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, on NBC's Today Show after his speech yesterday saying, no, he wasn't running for president, but you heard some curious things there. You see right there two guys from Florida who ran for the Republican nomination who were mentioned as guys who had run. So does that just add to the intrigue of what may go on for the GOP in Cleveland? Let's talk about it as we welcome back our panel. First from Newsmax, New York, one of our favorite leftists, Ellis Henican, noted radio and TV commentator who checks in from Newsmax, New York, and of course from Indianapolis, former White House spokesman for President George W. Bush, Pete Seat, who works on all sorts of projects as a project manager for Hathaway Strategies via Skype from Indianapolis. So, when you hear Paul Ryan from the Today Show, did he tip his hand saying, it may not be the guys right now, it might be an establishment darling like Marco Rubio or perhaps Jeb Bush? Pete Seat, do you see that happening?
Well, anything can happen at this point if this election cycle has taught us anything. But what Paul Ryan did was he narrowed the field by one, but expanded it by 14. And went back to the very beginning when we had 17 candidates vying for the Republican nomination. And so a lot of people say, oh, well, it's got to be Trump, Cruz, or Kasich, and it likely will be one of those three that comes out of the convention. But Paul Ryan is saying, hey, look at your options, delegates. On that second ballot, which is increasingly likely, take your time, make a smart choice, and let's win in November.
And what was that daytime drama of the 1970s, Ryan's Hope? I don't want to get overly dramatic, Ellis, but is Ryan's hope the establishment will turn to somebody other than the current three candidates, and won't that cause even a greater rift in the Republican Party?
I might call it Huckabee's hope, or Jindal's hope, or Gilmore's hope. I mean, there are so many has-beens who could step forward. It's almost cruel, actually, when you look at it, right? Ryan is saying he's not interested, but he raises in the hearts of all these folks who ended this cycle very disappointed that, well, maybe there's a little glimmer of hope in Cleveland. I just think it's going to be a blast. I want them all to run again. Come on out if all is forgiven.
Well, now
I would add, this is why they don't they just suspend campaigns, right? Is hoping that something like this will happen.
Suspended animation on ice to be resuscitated later. Well, to those ends, there's still some skepticism about the speaker. For example, the cartoon drawn by A.F. Branco for Americans for Limited Government. You take a look at it, it's entitled RNC GOP Establishment Winning Formula. It looks like Common Core math, but the final answer is spelled R-Y-A-N. Now, Pete, I got to tell you, the speaker will be the presiding officer at the convention. He has the power of recognition and the gavel in his hand. When push comes to shove, if things should fall into disarray, he wouldn't mind too much if the party turned to him, would he?
Well, I don't know. I got the sense that he really doesn't want to be president this cycle. Although, I mean, it could be a little bit of a Dick Cheney scenario there, right? Where he led the vice presidential process in the 2000 campaign, and lo and behold, he became the nominee for vice president with George W. Bush. So again, anything can happen, but Paul Ryan, I don't think would go to these lengths to beat this down and say, I'm not interested. What he's trying to do instead is send a message and a strong signal to these other candidates that there will be a policy agenda coming from the House Republicans that he's going to spearhead, that he wants them to embrace in this election cycle. He's trying to bring attention to his message and parlay this into something positive.
And yet there's attention for one of those aforementioned candidates who currently is in suspended animation. That would be Marco Rubio. He spoke with Mark Levin yesterday and gave an almost endorsement to one of the candidates. Let's look and listen.
I want the Republican nominee to be a conservative, and in my view, at this moment, of the candidates that are still actively campaigning, the only one that fits that criteria is Ted Cruz.
So is that an almost endorsement, Ellis? 20 seconds.
Oh, you got to listen carefully. He said, of those still campaigning. I'm with Pete on this one. I think Marco may be looking in the mirror, smiling and saying, why not the best? You know, we're still hanging around. I don't rule any of that stuff out this year.
What about that, Pete? It was a very lawyerly answer. You could parse it. Is Rubio still hoping to run? 15 seconds.
It's a dream answer for people like us, JD, because we can sit here and speculate all day long about what it means.
Well, one thing we will all agree on, this is a very eventful political year, and the twists and turns will continue, and that's why we will welcome you back in the not-too-distant future. Pete Seed in Indianapolis, Ellis Henican at Newsmax, New York. Thanks very much. When we come back, the way you see it, or really the questions you asked me, I'll try to answer them next.